Welcome to the InsideAIS.com YouTube channel. I'm Michael O'Neill, Principal Analyst at InsideAIS.com, and I'm privileged today to be joined by Tim Chadwick, President of Alfa Tech and leader of a workshop yesterday here at the Green Data Center Conference. They covered many great topics, including evaporative cooling. Tim, thanks very much for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad I could be here.
I'm glad you could too. Evaporative cooling has been a hot topic over the past few years, but you mentioned in your Green Data Center Conference workshop that it isn't a new technology. Could you give us a brief description of how evaporative cooling solutions have evolved?
Sure. So evaporative cooling, I don't know how far back it goes, certainly maybe Roman times or even beyond that, but when water evaporates, when it's hot outside and relatively dry, when water evaporates, you get a cooling effect that happens, and has been around, like I said, dating back to ancient times, so to speak. And since then, it's just been harnessed in more and more ways. It's a really cheap and effective way to get some air conditioning. It's not a high-tech solution. You can definitely get air conditioning. You'll find it on Home Depot stores and Lowe's stores across the country. So it's a very not highly technical solution, but you can harness that capability and by just evaporating a little bit of water.
And you've designed that into really high-tech solutions.
Absolutely.
like the Facebook
Sure.
data centers.
Absolutely. We started off using it as a technique to just humidify the air, and over the course of the last 15 plus years, data center design realized some of the potential of, well, it works great for humidification, but you've already bought all this infrastructure. Let's use it for the free cooling aspects of it, and then it's evolved into almost now being more purchased and more bought for the free cooling aspects, and you get the humidification as the side benefit. So.
And you know, if you go back 5 or 6 years, a PUE of 3 or just below 3 was considered to be relatively standard. Now the cutting edge facilities that you're designing and that others are designing are all the way down to like 1.1. How big a role does evaporative cooling or advanced cooling play in that?
Oh, huge. I mean, so when you're dealing with PUE, you've got obviously the baseline is the servers themselves, but on top of that, you add in electrical inefficiencies, transformers, UPS, all of those things that happen along the way. But you know, out of anything above 1.0, out of those elements, in simple terms, maybe half is mechanical and half is electrical, half air conditioning, half the power. So you're able to, by shutting off the air conditioning equipment, the refrigerant systems, the chillers, those are some pretty large motors and pretty large power consumers, and can dramatically cut. I mean, the industry average now is down. Probably 1.4 is a good. That's a good average design. Not the best out there, obviously, but certainly not the worst either. So yeah, it's a big part of being able to just get rid of the chilled water equipment or refrigerant equipment and turn them off. Hopefully all the time, and in some cases depending on where you are, but certainly turn them off 70% of the time, 80% of the time.
In your workshop, you had a really fascinating discussion that described the differences and different use cases that were appropriate for direct versus indirect evaporative cooling. Could you talk a little bit about the differences between the two systems and where they fit?
Sure. So direct evaporative cooling is basically adding the moisture to the air that's going to be in the space. So whatever's in the water that you add into the air is going to end up in your data center. And that will build up over time, obviously, as humidity levels go. So you can't continue to recirculate that air in a direct evaporative cooling environment. So you generally blow air in and you relieve out the same amount that you bring in, and that way you can keep a normal or a stable humidity level. There are times when you can't do that. You can't bring in as much fresh air, or you can't relieve it as much. Things like being near the ocean, salt air, you're worried about corrosion. Maybe you're in an industrial area where you got smokestacks and things like that you're worried about. And you know, sometimes maybe it's biological. You're worried about security or something like that. So indirect evaporative cooling works very nice in that you can recirculate the air. You're not adding any moisture to the actual space. So you can recirculate the air, but you still get the benefits of free cooling. It's not quite as efficient, slightly less, but if you're in one of those scenarios, like again, salt air environment or something like that, it's a great alternative that gets you close to direct evaporative cooling without the potential negative of building up humidity.
Thanks. And just as a final question, is evaporative cooling best suited to new facilities, to retrofits of existing facilities? Does it work in both?
Probably best to new facilities because, like I talked about, the bringing all the fresh air in and getting all the exhaust air back out in a direct evaporative cooling. There's a lot of infrastructure involved with that. You got to have holes in the wall or holes in your roof. Sometimes tough to do in an existing building. You're now dealing maybe with a structural retrofit.
Or a building that you share with somebody else who may not want holes in those walls.
Exactly, yeah. In a retrofit case, so there are definitely lots of equipment that still will work, or maybe an indirect solution might work better for that. Very, very case specific. Depends on what that existing building is. But new buildings, I can design it in, again, if you're in the right geography, location, I can design it into any new building, and I can design it into, I'll say, most existing buildings. So I guess from that perspective, new buildings are easier than existing.
Thank you so much. On
Sure.
behalf of InsideAS.com, Tim Chadwick, president of Alfa Tech, designer of Facebook and other leading data centers, and also a key driver of the opencompute.org information.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.